some of the things that he said, I'm like, no, that's, what article did you read that from, kind of thing like that. And so it's obvious that there's a lot of misinformation being put out there about Cardano. What limitations does Cardano or Emergo have in the marketing towards the end user or retail investor? As it seems most everything targets developers that can more easily understand a lot of the terminology, as the general public is more often led by overall sentiment and not necessarily the tech, because they simply don't understand it. That's kind of the question. He was very, I don't want to say averse to the technology, but it's kind of one of those things where there's a big disconnect between those that seem to understand more about the technological side of Cardano and those that just kind of follow it as something they put money into, hoping number go up, right? So my question is, what is Emergo's real role in terms of establishing kind of market dominance through marketing? And is it intentionally focused or seemingly focused more towards the developers, or is there kind of an end user retail market component in there that we're maybe missing a little bit?
Well, I don't speak for Emergo. It's an independent company. So, I can tell you what I know of Emergo and what their initiatives are, but I have no equity. I have no control or ownership. It's a completely independent entity. So I always put that caveat in when I mention or talk about Emergo. It's the same for the Cardano Foundation. It's a not-for-profit in Switzerland. We don't have any control. They have an independent board, and obviously they have their own money. But in general, the tripartite model, when it was set up, there was this idea that somebody worries about the engineering and science, somebody worries about a lot of the governance stuff and all the ecosystem stuff, and then somebody worries about the growth and acceleration and development of the ecosystem. So that was input, output, CF, and Emergo, respectively. Now, there were a lot of issues in that tripartite model because the community didn't have a lot of say on whether that was done well or not so well. And also the core entities, sometimes we all did a great job, sometimes we didn't, and it created some friction and frustration. So a lot of cryptocurrency people that were in the Cardano ecosystem said, hey, we want this. And if Emergo didn't do it, or the CF didn't do it, or we didn't do it, they say, oh, well, Cardano's a failure and let's move on. It's kind of outgrown the house. And so the whole point of Voltaire is decentralized governance, decentralized treasury management, and new, more representative institutions that everybody can join. And then you have different roles that are negotiated accordingly. So the Chang hard fork, which is almost imminent, what it brings to the table is a complete on-chain governance system, an on-chain constitution, and the endowment of new institutions to take care of things like the budget process that will be done on an annual basis, as well as the product backlog of Cardano as a whole. But then it also opens up the possibility to renegotiate the notion of how we do growth and marketing in general in Cardano. So, there probably ought to be regional and specialized entities to deal with different customer segments, entities to deal with enterprise, entities to deal with the retail people, entities to deal with specific market verticals that we as an ecosystem are interested in. And what's nice is that's a community-wide conversation, because everybody who has data has a voice and a vote, and either directly or indirectly through DREPs and institutions, they can express their desires of how much do we want to spend and what's a priority. So right now, the on-chain treasury has about $1 billion worth of ADA, depending on the price of ADA, any given Sunday. And that's at the command of the on-chain government. So it has to decide on an annualized basis, what's the budget? Should it be 100 million going out, 150 million going out, and who receives money and for what, and what oversight do we put into that structure? That's one of the first big differentiators between Bitcoin and Cardano. Cardano actually has its own sovereign wealth fund. It can pay for its bills. And as a holder of ADA, you actually have a say in that. You don't with Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana or these other ecosystems. You just trust institutions and you hope that they do the right job, and you can't fire them when they don't do a right job. And that might be okay when you're first getting started, but when you get to a large ecosystem like ours, it's over 20 billion in value, it's got millions of people, you can't run it with some hope that somebody's going to do something great, because frankly, they're always going to let you down, because even if they make one person happy, they'll make another person unhappy. For example, I'm an American, and when I heard that Emergo just partnered with Huawei, I was like, I don't know about that, man. That's a little sketch. But they're in Japan, and Huawei has a radically different perception in Singapore and Japan than it has in the United States. So that makes their people very happy, but it's not my decision on this side. But if you have decentralized governance, you can really get to a decentralized roadmap, and you can get to a decentralized treasury, and it really helps you start filtering out what those priorities are. Now, when I talk to the community, because they talk to me on a regular basis, usually most of their complaints are around three broad categories as dApp developers and people on Cardano. One is liquidity. They want more of it. So they want SEX listings, DEX listings. They want more turnaround. They want more inflow of capital into the ecosystem. Okay, fair. Two, venture capital. They do not like the fact that when they go to a VC, they get their slide deck shredded if the C word's in it, Cardano. It's not universally true, but there seems to be a stigma and bias against and misconceptions, as you've mentioned, about Cardano. So that's another fair point. And three, there's a strong desire for an improvement in some basic infrastructure, in particular oracles and stablecoins are two things that we see a lot. There are oracles in Cardano, there are stablecoins in Cardano, but they're not at the scale and level that people would expect them to be to compete with Solana and Ethereum. So there needs to be some house of upgrades there. So that's already an example of three items that require focused strategy and funding behind to go and execute. And when you have a decentralized government, you can say, let's make it a priority. And what's the strategy and who needs to be paid and get these things done? And then there's accountability. Do we solve in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? And also allows you to all of industry coordination. So for the liquidity side, for example, you get everybody who wants to be listed on a SEX and as a group approach the exchanges as opposed to individual projects, because when they do that, the exchanges really screw them. They say, hey, give us 7% of the supply or do this or do that. And you just get hammered. So you can approach as a group and say, okay, let's sort out the regulatory and technical stuff, and let's create kind of a fair consideration on the business side. So collective bargaining, really helps you with that. With respect to things like stablecoins, it's starting to get to a situation where there's a nice blending of homegrown versus external that I think a strategy could be evident, and we can get where we need to go. And then with respect to things like venture capital, I think the partner chains framework that we're talking about, what we're planning with Midnight, is going to kind of open that up, because a lot of Cardano ventures will be able to do cross-chain transactions. So you don't enter in saying we have to take the network effect of Ethereum or Solana or Bitcoin. It's not sum zero anymore. They can consume Cardano as a service, like you would a web application, for example. So in that sense, they can stay on Ethereum, but transaction volume still comes to the Cardano applications and value comes into Cardano. So that really helps the discussion, because the VC is no longer thinking, God, is Cardano going to win the layer one wars? They don't care. Now they can really focus on the project itself and say, okay, there's enough to go around here in this cross-chain future. So there's a lot to do, and we've been doing it. And as I mentioned, Chang is imminent, and we're really, as an ecosystem moving forward, the Cardano Constitution is being written. All the governance organizations are really getting stood up, and it changes the role of IO, the foundation, and Emergo. It's up to the foundation Emergo to decide what their role is in this ecosystem as we move. But for IO's perspective, we're going to look at it as both a venture studio where we build stuff like Midnight, and also as a core developer. And we're now constrained by that intersect relationship where they basically are the accountable party for audit and oversight and the product backlog. And we provide the engineers and scientists with 15 other companies to basically get Cardano along. And we think it'll actually speed up development quite a bit.